When you think of Vikings, what comes to mind? Fierce warriors, shining axes, sailing across stormy seas in longships? Yes, that image is iconic, full of battles, raids, and adventure. But is that the whole picture? Was Viking life really just about war and conquest? Now, imagine something different. What if I told you that, in many ways, Viking life might have been better than yours? It might sound crazy, but hold on. I'm not just talking about battles or victories. I'm talking about how they lived, how they ate, how they connected with others, and how they found purpose in everyday life. In this video, we're going to compare the ancient Viking world with our modern lives and find out if, in some ways, they were ahead of their time. We'll explore topics like health, natural eating, connection with nature, community, life purpose, and even personal freedom. Could it be that, in the end, the life of a Norse warrior had more quality than the fast-paced, stressful, screen-filled routine you live today? Let's dive into this journey to answer that question and maybe, along the way, discover a few valuable lessons from the past. To start, let's look at something directly tied to our health and well-being. The Viking diet and their active lifestyle, something that might still have a lot to teach us today. Today, many people are searching for healthy diets and ways to stay active. But Vikings were already living that way, naturally without gyms or processed foods. Their diet was simple, yet powerful. Fresh products, gathered or hunted from nature, with no preservatives, dyes, or artificial additives. They ate a lot of fish, especially omega-3 rich species like herring and salmon, which helped keep their hearts strong and their minds sharp. Hunting provided lean, nutritious meats, while wild berries, roots, and seasonal vegetables rounded out their meals with vitamins and fiber. They also made use of medicinal herbs, plants we now recognize as valuable allies for natural health. Honey was another prized ingredient, used both as food and as a remedy for wounds and infections. Another key point was their active lifestyle. From a young age, Vikings learned to hunt, build, sail, and fight, keeping their bodies constantly moving. There was no room for the sedentary habits that plague so many people in the digital age. When we compare this to modern eating habits, the contrast is clear. Today, many consume processed foods packed with sugar, unhealthy fats, and chemical additives. Sedentary behavior has become a global epidemic, leading to a wave of chronic diseases. Meanwhile, Vikings lived in simple harmony with their environment, taking what nature gave them and making the most of it. And as a result, their bodies responded well, even in the face of harsh conditions. This direct connection with food and physical activity was a true investment in their physical and mental health. And maybe that's why, when it comes to diet and lifestyle, Viking life might have been better than yours. But food isn't everything. For the Vikings, their bond with nature went far beyond the plate. Let's now explore how they lived in deep connection with the world around them, in a way that for many of us feels distant and almost forgotten. If the Viking diet already reveals a deep bond with the environment, the way they lived in harmony with nature went even further. To them, nature wasn't just a source of resources, it was part of their very existence, something sacred and essential. Vikings spent most of their time outdoors, hunting in dense forests, fishing in icy rivers, and tending small farms adapted to the harsh northern climate. They knew how to read the sky, the stars, the clouds, the wind. Everything signaled the changing seasons and helped them plan for survival through long winters. This close connection was also reflected in their spirituality. Their gods, like Thor, the protector of storms, and Freyr, linked to fertility and harvest, were personifications of nature and its forces. Respect for the land and the elements was a core value, present in their rituals, celebrations, and even daily choices. In contrast, the modern world keeps most people indoors, locked in offices and homes, surrounded by screens and technology. Contact with nature is often reduced to a walk in the park or a glimpse through a window. This disconnection has deep effects on mental health and overall well-being, something even science now confirms. While the Vikings lived in rhythm with the natural world, we often exist out of sync, detached from what surrounds us. And maybe that growing distance is one reason we feel more stressed and anxious. By understanding how the Vikings valued and respected nature, we start to see that they had a balance many of us today long for, but rarely achieve. And it wasn't just nature that kept them grounded. Community and a strong sense of belonging were also pillars of Viking life. Let's explore how they built relationships that, in many ways, might feel more meaningful than our own. Living among Vikings meant being part of a small, close-knit community where everyone knew each other and depended on one another to survive. Villages were made up of families and clans that shared responsibilities, resources, and protection. Social life was built on honor and mutual respect. Laws were upheld in public assemblies called things where decisions were made collectively. Public judgment didn't just resolve disputes, it reinforced social bonds and kept the group united. This kind of structure created a genuine sense of belonging. Loyalty to one's clan and family brought security and purpose. No one was ever truly alone. Even in the hardest times, there was a real and present support system. In contrast, modern life, though digitally connected, often leads to isolation and loneliness. In large cities, anonymity and individualism tend to dominate. And social media, ironically, can deepen the sense of disconnection. For Vikings, community was vital, not just for emotional well-being, but for physical survival. They relied on each other, and they understood that one person's success was everyone's success. But feeling part of something greater isn't just a social matter. It's also deeply tied to having a clear sense of purpose in life. And that's something the Vikings understood remarkably well. In the next chapter, for the Vikings, life wasn't just a string of meaningless days. From an early age, every person had a clear role to fulfill, whether as a warrior, craftsman, navigator, farmer, mother, or clan leader. That clarity of purpose gave each day a tangible sense of meaning, where every effort contributed to the greater good. They lived in a culture rich with rituals and traditions that honored both life and death. Honor was a supreme value. Dying bravely in battle was respected just as much as living a productive and loyal life within the community. This sense of purpose shaped their behavior, their choices, and even their worldview. There was no existential emptiness, no widespread feeling of being lost or directionless, as we often see today. In modern times, many people face existential crises, questioning the value of their work, feeling like life has become hollow or disconnected from any greater meaning. In contrast, the Vikings had clearly defined goals, and that certainty made them more resilient. Living with a clear purpose helps us endure hardship, overcome fear, and even find joy in the harshest of environments. It's a lesson the modern world is still trying to learn. But purpose alone wasn't everything. For the Vikings, freedom and self-sufficiency were also fundamental pillars of the life they led. One of the defining traits of Viking life was autonomy. They didn't rely on others for the essentials of survival. They knew how to build their own homes using wood from the surrounding forests, forge weapons from the iron they mined, weave clothes to endure harsh winters, and grow the food they needed. This self-sufficiency gave the Vikings a sense of control over their own destiny. They were masters of their environment, able to adapt and survive without depending on distant empires, far-off governments, or powerful corporations. Today, by contrast, most people live entangled in a complex web of dependencies. Jobs they don't control, technologies they don't fully understand, systems that turn them into passive consumers. We've moved further and further away from the idea of true independence. For the Vikings, that freedom was essential, both to their personal identity and to their collective culture. They took pride in their ability to provide for themselves and their community, valuing their strength and hands-on knowledge. But of course, this life of freedom also came with its own set of challenges. And that brings us to a deeper reflection on the harsher side of Viking existence. So far, we've explored many aspects of Viking life that might even seem better than our own. But it's important to remember, their world was no fairy tale. There were real challenges and hardships, Average life expectancy was low, with many dying young from disease, accidents, or in battle. There were no antibiotics, no anesthesia, no modern medical treatments. Even a simple injury could become fatal. Winters were long, harsh, and dark, testing both physical and mental endurance. Work was constant and demanding, from farming and construction to hunting and toolmaking. The comfort and convenience we know today were far from their reality. On top of that, violence and conflict were part of daily life, whether through raids, clan disputes, or harsh punishments for breaking the law. And yet, despite all these difficulties, the Vikings had something many of us may have lost: a deep sense of belonging, purpose, and connection to the life around them. Which makes us wonder, despite the adversity, were there still parts of their life that were, in some ways, better than ours? When we look at Viking life, it's easy to be fascinated by the parts that actually seem better than our own. A more natural diet, a real connection with nature, strong community bonds, a clear sense of purpose, and a freedom of self-sufficiency. Of course, we can't ignore the harsh challenges they faced: short life expectancy, disease, brutal winters, and constant violence. But what stands out is how, even in the face of all that, they managed to live with a deep sense of belonging and meaning. Today, despite all our technology, comfort, and progress, many of us feel disconnected, stressed, and lost. Maybe we have a lot to learn from the simplicity and strength of the Viking way of life. So I ask you, are you really living better than a Viking? Has modern comfort truly brought more quality of life than the connection, purpose, and freedom they had? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think about this comparison between past and present. And of course, if you enjoyed this journey through time, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the amazing stories we have coming up. See you next time.